we were at the Mibsariya Chizeh. We were talking about how speech is separate, while thought is part and parcel with one's identity. So we talked about 1 + 1 = 3 and all that.
Mm-hmm.
Except that he says, so we can also learn from man himself something more.
But the speech does come from your thought.
Okay, but again, the difference is that in the thought, it's still part of you. And the speech, it comes out. So you can say 1 + 1 = 3, but you can't understand that 1 + 1 = 3. So in the same way, he says, that really, whatever you speak, if you're speaking what you understand, then the speech itself was completely part, it's nullified to, it's completely part of the thought.
And then, where are you? I lost you. Somewhere here, but I can't.
Still here. Somewhere here.
Okay.
wait. מבשרי חזה. כמו באדם מתחילה... כן, כל העולמות, וכמו שבטל הדיבור אצל המחשבה, וביטול גמור, and just as the speech is completely nullified, meaning it's part, it's one and the same thing as the thought before it comes out, and the way that you can see it is כי ברגע אחד יכול לחשוב דברים עד אין קץ.
Like the story of the Riza.
Right. So you can, in your thought, you can think of something that would take
a long
time to explain. כן, כל העולמות שהם רק דיבור אחד, והוא נמשך מחוכמתו יתברך. So, all the worlds, which are the product of just one utterance, because the Gemara says, והלא במאמר אחד היה יכול להיבראות, that even though the world was created with 10 utterances, the Talmud says, but it could have been created with just one.
Right.
Because in Hashem's case, since the speech and the thought are both infinite in their nature, so the one word or one utterance he would have said could have contained all of his thought. He could have been mitzamtzim, he could have contracted all of his thought into one statement, which is what you see that wise people do. Right? The wise person finds a way to say everything he wanted to say in one utterance. And then, if a wise person hears what he said, he begins to unravel everything that he wanted to say. Okay? But he didn't say, because he was able to contract it. So all the worlds emanate from God's wisdom, from his thought, as it were. And that's what it means when it says, in Zechariah it says that his arrow will shoot out like lightning. And the idea that it's like lightning is that wisdom is likened to lightning. And it's saying that all the energy that was in the wisdom is all captured within one spark of lightning. Everything is there. And, okay, that's... So what do we gain from this? That really when the world is still, again, we don't want to understand this as a process. It's not like at some point God brought out the world. No, the process is in us. We see the world as having been taken out of godliness, as it were. That's how we experience it. But really, it's still in his thought.
There wasn't some point in time when Hashem created the world? There wasn't some difference between before and after?
Again, from our point of view, yes. From his point of view, no. From his point of view, there's no shinui. There's no change. It's just that the certain utterance became visible, became possible to see it separately. But there was no change in him, because this utterance is still part of him. So this is one of the two big parables that he brings to explain this. The other is the light of the sun in the sun. That when the light was still in the sun, you couldn't tell the difference between the sun and the light that would be emanated. And when the sun's light is emanated, then it seems that it's left it. It seems that it's left the sun. But really it hasn't. Really it's still part of the sun. Because why would you say that it's left? It's just that the sun is expanded. It's like the sun is expanded, right? That's you could think about it that way. Instead of saying the light has left the sun, how did you decide how big the sun is? Why do you decide the sun is only to here and it's not to here? How do you make that distinction? So you say, well, wherever the temperature is over 4,000 degrees Kelvin, so that's the sun. And wherever it's not, where it drops, then that's already not the sun. Or you would say, the reason for the temperature being so high is that there's a fusion reaction going on. So wherever I see the fusion reaction going on, that's the sun. And wherever it's not happening, that's already not the sun. Okay, so let's follow that. So the other option is that what the sun produces is also part of the sun. Again, it's like the question with speech. I'm producing speech. I'm making words. Are these words me or not? So at one level, they're not, because I don't contain them anymore. If you tape them and record them, you can take them somewhere else and play them at a different time and whatever, and it's got nothing to do with me. So they're separate in that sense. On the other hand, they are part of what I produced. They came from my thought. So if they encompass my thought, then they are me. When a novelist writes a novel, does it continue to be part of him even after he's finished?
Sure, yes.
So from a certain perspective, yes, but also we would say no, because you can take it anywhere. It's not related to him. He doesn't have to come with it, and so on. So that's how it is with a human being. But by God, what he's saying is that you can't make this distinction, really. You can't really make that distinction. Hashem is, if you have his word, you have him. Meaning, if you have the world, which is created by his word, by his utterance, then in a certain sense you have him. He's here. And nothing has changed. Because there's no outside to go to. It can't really depart. What you're saying is that in Hashem, when we say speech, we mean that it can look separate. That's what we mean.
But in a sense, speech is misleading.
Why?
It's not speech. Hashem's thought and speech is an action. Whereas your thought and speech is not an action. You can't hold on to your speech. Even if you put it on a tape recorder, you can't physically hold the speech that comes out of your mouth.
I say
You
the
can
opposite.
record it, but it's not the same thing.
I understand the distinction, I would say exactly the opposite. That by Hashem, it's not an action. It's still, in the sense of there being no change, it's still him. It's like nothing, it's just a different way of relating to him. I can relate to him as having separated a part of him out of himself, and I can relate to him that everything is still part of him. And it's up to me how I want to relate. Again, it's like, why is it that when somebody says something, we hold them to it? Why? Let's say somebody made a vow, right? And he said, I promise to do so and so. And then we hold him to it. Well, he says, why? I'm not connected to those words anymore. I said those words, you could record them and do whatever you want with it. I say, no, when you said that, you expressed something of yourself. So something of yourself is still in those words. So did you say those words or not? And he says, yes, I said those words, but it was only words. And there's a difference between a politician and the regular person. The politician will say, so I said, so what if I said? I'm not connected to it. And I'm me, and whatever I said for whatever reason, but that's not me. So you get to choose with speech which way you want to look at it. Do you want to look at it as separate, or do you want to look at it as capturing the essence of what the person wanted? And you have this whole question. So the same thing with with the world. Since we describe it as Hashem speaking, He spoke the world into being, so we can look at it in two different ways. Like you need to look at it, the world is separate, you go do with it whatever you want. Or you can come and say, no, I hold Hashem to it. What do you mean I hold it? It's still Him. It's capturing His essence. But it's certainly not the same thing as His thought. That when His thought is revealed, that's certainly, there's no question there that it's part of Him. Yeah. The same thing with Torah. So when Hashem comes and gives the Torah, He's revealing His will. And the will is even more integral to the person, to the personhood, than even thought and speech are. Even thought is. So speech certainly is not as integral as will is. Will is, like we're saying, this is completely Him. So that's why we say that when Hashem gave the Torah and He told us His will, then it's a much higher level than the creation of the world, because the world was created by speech. Yeah, so here the fact that Hashem spoke at Mount Sinai doesn't mean that the main thing is the speech, because when He spoke the world into being, He didn't reveal His will. But when He spoke the Ten Commandments, He revealed what He wants. And what He wants, that's Him. That's He Himself. That you can't separate, really. So He's saying that so what does He want to say? So let's see the continuation. ובטובו מחדש בכל יום תמיד מעשה בראשית. וגם אחר יברא מראה אצל הקדוש ברוך הוא אין דיבורו מובדל ממנו יתברך חס ושלום, כי אין לך דבר שחוץ ממנו. ולכן קמי כולה כלא חשיב ממש. So the breakdown is that by Hashem there are no words that you could say have become completely independent of God. Whatever He spoke is still part of Him. That you can't say there's something outside of Him. So when He speaks, and when He speaks, when we say God said, let there be light, we don't mean to say that the words let there be light exited the divine. They suddenly became
separate.
Yeah, separate and standalone in some way, and you can record them and go do whatever. No, from Hashem's perspective, whatever He spoke is still Him. Mm-hmm. It's just that from our perspective, we have the capability of looking at it as if it were like human speech, that it could be divorced from the person who said it. We have that capacity. It's not that really it's, again, so from His perspective, the words never left. The words are still part of Him. So again, why do we call it speech? I said, like you asked, so why do we say that the world was created? Seemingly nothing changed. He says, no, for us something changed. That when we look at it, then we can say the world is either part of God, or we can say it's not part of God. And that's what it means. It's part of Hashem's thought, as it were. It suddenly became in such a way that it could be treated as separate or a part of. And then it's up to you. The question then becomes, if there's nothing outside of Hashem, so who are we? Okay. So it also says that God created man by speaking, and then He breathed into him the breath of life. So you have to understand that here's the amazing thing, that He's able to create something that itself experiences being separate, even though it's not separate. No human being is separate from the divine. It's all one, because there's nothing outside of God. So even I, with all my crazy mishigas, I'm still part of Hashem. But I don't experience it that way. I experience it as if I'm separate. I'm a separate consciousness. And so there's many examples that we talked a lot about when a dream.
Why do you say you act as if it's a separate consciousness? And you put on your talisman to feel it. That's not separate. That's a connection with Hashem.
It's connection, but just the fact that I need to connect implies that I was separate before. Just the fact that I'm commanded to do implies that I'm separate. How otherwise? What's the purpose of commanding? If I was just part of God, then everything I do is fine. But my experience is not like that. I can't run against my experience. My experience is that I need to do work in order to feel that I'm part of God.
Work and action. You need to do some action.
I need to remedy the situation. And even then I can't remedy it completely. It's very interesting that when you think about what are we remedying exactly? How does this work? So it's called bittul. It's called nullification. So in the East, when they nullify, that's all they do. They only nullify the self. And then what do they feel? Empty. Everything is empty. There's nothingness. And so God is what? Nothingness. We nullify in order to connect with God's being. We don't nullify in order to nullify. There's a purpose in the nullification. The purpose is to connect to Hashem, who is absolute. And so we have a different notion. It's not that once you nullify, then you see God in your image, which is now I'm nothing. But rather, when you nullify, you suddenly understand that Hashem, that you're part of Hashem, who is everything, and not nothing. Who is absolute being, who's much more than anything I could ever be. Again, these are things we've talked about a lot of times. He's just repeating it. It's
good to repeat it. Because eventually some of it sinks in.
I hope so.
Not much, but a few drops here and there.
It says even more so. The worlds themselves are nullified one to another. What do we mean? נקרא למטה נגד עולם התחתון בחינת מחשבה ובטל אצלו. So the divine speech above, from God's perspective, what's called speech, meaning that aspect of himself which can now be understood as being separate. For the lower worlds, for whatever's lower than that level, they would call it thought. What's the example? כמו שהדיבור של הרב נעשה בחינת מחשבה אצל התלמיד. So when I hear the Rebbe speaking, his words become my thought. What he's saying, because I can't see his thought, I can only come in contact with his words. So for me, his words are like his thought. That's as good as I can get. In myself, those words become my thought itself. The words become thought. They emanated from thought, because that's all. Because I can't see into his brain, I can't see what he's thinking, but I can hear what he's saying. And what he is saying turns into a thought process in me. So what does that mean? It means that what was considered to be separate for him from the Rebbe, because he spoke it, and how much the responsibility does he now? The question we asked before: are the words really still part of him or not? At a certain level they are, at a certain level they're not. But they were speech; they were separate. When it comes to me, these words become my thought, so they become part of me. They're no longer separate, right? They've been upgraded, as it were. Before there was something that could be separate. Now, relative to me, they've become something that can't be separate. It's like my thought. It's part of me. So he's saying that what in a higher world would be considered separate, in a lower world is considered to be part of. intrinsic. You can't separate it out. And this happens every time you go down. So the lower part of the higher world becomes the higher part of the lower world. Right? So that's what it means. He has here a thing to look in Torah, in Likutei Torah and Shlach. I looked at it before this morning and I couldn't find what he's referring to. There's something there, I guess, about it. V'zeu leit machshava tfisa be'klal. And this is what it means that thought cannot grasp him. Meaning, דהיינו, אף עולמות עליונים מאוד שהם בחינת מחשבה, הם בטלים אצלו יתברך ולא תפיסה בכלל, כי הוא למעלה ממחשבה. So even the higher worlds, here in this case we're calling worlds, is it thought, speech, or action? So even the thought, which is higher, you cannot say that it captures, that it grasps the total sum of what God is. Even his thought cannot. Okay? All the more so that his speech cannot. V'zeu stima dechol stimin. And the fact that Hashem is beyond all recognition, all understanding, even with thought, even in his own thought, that's called stima dechol stimin, which literally means the concealed within the concealed. Temira and v'chulu. This is the beginning of the Idra. Temira dechol tmirim. ועל זה נאמר הציווי, ואהבת את השם אלוקיך, שיתבונן כל כך באחד ממש, שיהיה הוויה אלוקיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך. דהיינו מחשבה, דיבור ומעשה, שלא יהיה לו מחשבה, דיבור ומעשה כלל, רק בטלים באחד שלמעלה מן המחשבה ולית מחשבה תפיסה בי. So he says that's what we mean when we say you should love Hashem your God. How do you come to this love? This love is a product of meditating on oneness, on God's oneness. And what it does is it says that even your heart, your soul, and your me'od, which correspond to machshava, dibur, and ma'isa, they correspond to thought, speech, and action, they should all be cancelled, nullified within the one, which is above even the thought. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to say that all my thought, speech, and action is entirely 100% nullified within Hashem. That's what I want to achieve when I say Shema. Meaning when I close my eyes and I try to achieve something, what am I trying to achieve? Just closing my eyes, that's an empty gesture. There must be something more to it. So what are we trying to achieve when we say Shema? We're trying to cancel all our thought, speech, and action so that it's encompassed, as it were, becomes once again part and parcel with godliness. Yeah? That's what it means to love. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
I thought, what did we understand love as before? So I understood love as affinity. You couldn't say that love is that I have. I'm drawn to something. What he's saying here is that love is something that indicates a state in which the borders are taken down, and that all of me, my thought, speech, and action, is entirely a part of godliness. That's what I need to feel when I say Shema. That's the experience of loving God. Say it like this. Sometimes people say, after their parents pass away, what would my father have done in such a situation? Okay? How can I ask such a question? Because his thought and my thought are not one. But if his thought and my thought are the same, then it doesn't matter that he's not here. If we're sharing the same thought. So for instance, nobody ever says, Well, maybe there are people who say, but it would be a little strange. So 100 plus 100. I wish my father was alive. He would have known the answer. Why don't we say something like that? Because we're already part and parcel of something that is in common for all of us. Okay? And I know that he would have said 200, and I know that I say 200. How do I know that what he would have said?
Because Yadua.
But by Yadua, what do we mean? We mean that we all share in the same understanding in these topics. There's no difference. Now, when it comes to what do I do if I have, I don't know, a child who acts this in this way? So there's no one size fits all. So there I can say, I wish I could ask my father what he would have done. I wish I could. Why? Because I know that here my thought is not my father's thought. Here we're not privileged to just be sharing in something that's common sense. And there's all kinds of considerations, and each case is different. So the way he would have thought of it and the way I think of it, they're different. So it's warranted to say, I wish I could get his advice. It would make sense. So when we say Shema, we have to think about it this way, that whatever my thought is, whatever my speech is, whatever my actions are, to love God means that they would be exactly common to godliness. They would be the same thing. They're not any different. They're not like my thought, speech, and action, but they're entirely nullified within godliness. They're one and the same. So whatever I think, I want it to be what Hashem would have thought. Whatever I speak, I want it to be what Hashem would have spoken. And whatever I act, I want it to be what Hashem would have done.
Hashem acts differently, speaks differently, or thinks differently.
Why?
Because he's not the same as us.
What do you mean differently? That they're different from one another?
No, his thought, speech, and action is different from ours. He's part of the infinite.
And that's what we try to nullify in Kriyas Shema. That's what we're trying to nullify. That gap between how he thinks and how I think, I want to get rid of it. That's what I mean when I say V'ahavta et Hashem Elokecha b'chol levavcha. That's what he's saying. That to love God means that there's no difference between what I think and what he thinks. How do I know what he thinks? Very easy.
It
says in Torah what he thinks. Anything that I'll think about in Torah is what he thinks about. What about what he says? I know what it says. He brings the world into being. So I can read the Bereshis, I can read the Genesis. I can say those words. Or, as the sages say, he also says kind words to people. Okay, so I'll say kind words also. And actions, that's even easier. Everything is a mitzvah. Yeah. Everything I do can be a mitzvah. I don't want to do things that are not mitzvahs. So that's what it means to love God with my actions. So it's really what's called being not separate. It's not imitating God. We're not imitating. Imitating is just the beginning. When you imitate, I'll give an example. When you imitate a person who's solving, you're a 6-year-old and you're imitating a person solving an addition problem. You're only imitating them because you don't understand it yet. So you know how to technically do it. So you do this. You do 45 plus 63. Okay, so 5 plus 3, that's equal to 8. And 4 and 6, that's 10. So I write down 10. So it's 108. That's very nice. Could be that I just did it technically like a computer and I don't understand. I'm just imitating how somebody would do this. But I don't understand why 45 and 63 is equal to 108. I haven't ever counted, let's say. I've never ever convinced myself that this is the right answer. I'm only going through the motions. It says that's not love. Love is when you understand the same way as the person that you're in the beginning imitating, but now you understand why they do what they do. And that's what love really means. It's the ability to share the understanding, to share the speech, to share the action. And again, it's love, meaning it comes from me. That I love him, meaning I feel this. It's not just that I'm just imitating it. And that's the big difference between Yiddishkeit and everything else. Because everybody knows how to nullify themselves. That's not a big deal. So you become nothing. Okay, I'm nothing. The question is, can your thought, speech, and action become holy? Can they become something that is not just imitating God, but it does it for the same reasons that God does it? Meaning, essentially, you become one with God. That's what we're looking for.
Again, same more question. You can't put yourself into Hashem's place and understand why he does what he does, why he wants what he wants.
That's why we have Torah. Why can't you? Of course you can.
Torah's only part of it.
It's not that it's part of it.
It doesn't teach you everything about what Hashem says, thinks, and does.
Why not? How do you know it doesn't?
Because, for example, in the Torah you have the story of the creation.
Good.
So we know that Hashem created the world. We didn't get the mechanism by which that world was created. Some things are not revealed.
Not revealed doesn't mean that it's not there. That's what he's saying all the time. The fact that it hasn't been revealed doesn't mean that it's not contained in it. It's just not revealed. That's why we said that when God gave the Torah, he contracted all of the infinite into the finite. It's there, it's just not revealed. I don't know it yet. I don't yet know how to completely build the world myself, because I don't know, like you say, the mechanism or something else that's hidden inside, whatever it is. But it is here. It is here. So this is not going to help my rational mind, because my rational mind needs separation. It lives on separation and wants understanding separately. But when I say to love, I'm not talking about the rational mind. I'm talking about a state of being one with Hashem. And being one with Hashem means that I'm thinking his thoughts. These are his thoughts. The Torah is his thoughts. Is it? Have I understood all of it? No, because it's not revealed. But not because it's not there. That's the argument. That the Torah is more than just a partial revelation. It's a revelation of everything, except, it contains everything. But not everything has been revealed in it. That's how I understand this. ועל זה נאמר הציווי, ואהבת. דהיינו מחשבה דיבור מעשה, שלא יהיה לו מחשבה דיבור מעשה כלל, רק בטלים באחד. Shouldn't have any separate thought, speech, and action. It should all be part of Hashem. And this is, he says here, I'll just read it, that the patriarchs, in chapter 34 in the Tanya, we just read this last week, לא הפסיקו אפילו שעה אחת מלקשר דעתם ונשמתם לריבון העולמים בביטול הנ"ל. They didn't stop for 1 hour, meaning not for a moment, from connecting their mind and their soul with godliness. Everything they did, every single hour of the day, all their thought, speech, and action was with consciousness that I want to be part of God. I want to be one and the same with Him. I don't want to be separate. והוא למעלה מבחינת מחשבה, דיבור ומעשה, ולכן אחר שיעמיק האדם בביטול הנ"ל כפי יכולתו, זאת ישיב אל ליבו, אעשה לי משכן ומכון. So what does he mean to say? That after a person thinks about these things, that the patriarchs were one and the same. They were always a chariot for the divine presence. A person can come and say, I want to be the same. Maybe I don't have the same talents, the same abilities that they have. So my actions are going to be limited. But whatever my actions are, I want them to express godliness. I want them to be a chariot for godliness. Meaning I want my consciousness to always feel that whatever I'm doing, it's godly. It's not my needs. It's God's needs.
I don't feel that I'm connected to God. The other things that it says you have to learn the Torah, but I don't feel that I am connected.
That's the missing piece. The way that most people see Yiddishkeit is that doing the mitzvos, or learning, or davening, or whatever it is that we do, we're we, and God's God, and He told us to do this. Whether you believe this or not.
So I do it because Hashem told me to do it, but it doesn't necessarily mean that I am actually connected.
Right.
Maybe I am.
So the missing piece here is that it's not that you want to stop doing it as a separate being. You want to stop seeing it as some kind of separate action that you're taking. This action is not you doing it. This is simply another expression of godliness. I've become an expression of godliness in the world. When I daven, so we had some examples of this. For instance, when a person's wearing a uniform, and they come with the authority of the state, of whatever it is, that gave them the uniform. So we don't come and say, there's even a law against it. We can't come and say to this person, you're an idiot. You're this, you're that. Why? Because the authorities come and say you're insulting us, not him. Because he's not a separate entity right now. He's
representing.
Right, he's representing me. Us. The authority in him. The authority vested in you.
Okay, so if you want to say that I don't go into a house of ill repute or go into a non-kosher restaurant, because that would be a chilul Hashem, because I'm representing Hashem. I'm representing the Rebbe. Okay, that's okay. I would do all the averas I could, but I don't, because that would be a disgrace for Hashem. You don't want to disgrace Hashem. Yeah, that's true.
But that's still separate, because I don't want to disgrace. You're talking about the negative.
Yeah.
The positive is, but when you do something, who's doing it? Am I doing it because I need it? For instance, that this I don't know, this pakach, how do you say pakach? This clerk, whatever, he comes to your house and says, you didn't get a license to build this, so we're going to tear it down. So how do most people react?
Take a gun and shoot him.
Yeah, because who gave you the authority to do this?
The Lord did.
He comes and says, no, you can't, because I'm not doing it because of what I want and what I don't want. This is what the law says. This is the authority that I've been given.
So that's negative.
And people who are normal, they understand that they can't take a gun and shoot the supervisor or whatever. It's not going to help them, because the only thing it's going to do is it's going to get them more in trouble.
Right.
So what does a normal person say? He says, I don't see you, the person, you, the supervisor, whatever, that's come to tear down my shack because I wasn't allowed to build it. I see the law behind you, the authority behind you. And that's where I'm going to fight. So understand that I don't have a personal war with you.
Okay.
The same thing is when I daven. Who's davening? So if I look at you and I say, he's davening, then that means that you're not nullified to the authority in you.
So the closest, the only time they can possibly think they can get anything like that is when I go to people and give them money for Pesach or Tissa, whatever it is, and they say...
They thank you profusely.
And they say, no, I can't take this because... I say, but it's not my money, the money belongs to the Rebbe, and I'm just the agent of the Rebbe giving you the money. Or if they say to me, thank you, I say, there's nothing to do with me whatsoever. I'm simply the postman. When the postman brings you a check in the post, you don't kiss him, right? Because there's nothing to do with him, right? So this is nothing to do with me.
Right.
This is something which has come from the Rebbe.
Right.
But I don't think it is coming from a Shem. Maybe I do, but or somebody comes and tells me after 20 years of looking for the right shidduch and he gets married, I'm overjoyed for him. But that's the closest you can get to something positive.
You can get closer.
See?
That when you put on tefillin, it's not you putting on tefillin.
It's quite a big step up.
At least during Shema you should be in that state. What do you say?
It's a pity that I grew up as a wild animal without any connection whatsoever to things like that.
I don't think that these things are easily taught to teenagers.
No, I wasn't aware of it.
I don't think that even if they were aware of it, it would help much.
I said something to my wife, which she absolutely had no idea what I was talking about. And she keeps asking me, why did I say it? Because it's just nonsense what I said. I said to her that my bar mitzvah sedra was Parshas Tissa, because it was close to my birthday. Which, by the way, is talking about the Kohanim and their clothes, and then Tissa is talking about the pharmacist who made the spices. And it's all there anyway. So I said, when I laned my bar mitzvah sedra, it was very unusual. Came from the equivalent of a Young Israel type shul. United, what's it called? The Chief Rabbi's type shul. Formally from. So nobody drove on Shabbos once they got close to the shul. Then they drove on Shabbos to the top of the road, then they walked out. Because people would say it was offensive to the rabbi, not that they understood the connection to Hashem. No connection to Hashem, right? Mm-hmm. So the guy who told me the Seder, a very nice guy, he wasn't a rabbi, he was a guy who was kicked down to Germany, he came to England, he went to Gateshead. He knew Torah, but he wasn't. So he taught me the Bar Mitzvah Seder. So I said to my wife, I said, it amazes me that this nice person who taught me the whole Seder from beginning to end, and taught me how to learn, never once turned around and said to me, it's very interesting. Parshas Tissa is the only parsha after Shemos to the end where the name Moshe Rabbeinu isn't there. Mm-hmm. So she said to me, I have no idea what you're saying. She said, I don't understand why you're saying that. I said, because I'm trying to say that there was no separation of what the Torah, what the Sedra was about. You're nearly 13. You want to lane, I'll teach you to lane. But there was never any, and he wasn't, he was very friendly to me. My parents weren't so religious, so there was nobody at home. So I used to go to eat in his house and Shabbos, go to shul. Everything, we were close. But it never seemed to occur to him, there was no thought in his mind that he should say, listen, you're reading this Seder, it's about, I had no idea what it was about. These words mean, and I don't think I could have taken the Sonsina Chumash and read it in English. Think of doing such a thing. No reason to do that. I said, I would have thought he would have given me one thing out of interest. She says to me, I don't understand what you're talking about. I have no idea. Why should he have done that?
Who said?
My wife.
Okay, why? Why? So she says you're at a higher level. Because if you don't mix in your thinking, you don't mix, and you just do, so you're just the agent of doing. The moment you start mixing in your understanding and your thinking and so on and so forth.
But nobody tried to teach me anything to understand.
Yeah, but I'm saying if they did, then you would have been removed from the act. You would have been separate from the act already. But now that you only have the act, you only have the garment, the act of laning is like Hashem's will. That's 100%. Except why are you doing it? The same question, why is the horse...
Oh, why was it there? Because my brother did it.
Because your parents told you to.
No.
Oh, because you were envious of your brother.
No, it was. That's what we do, you know.
It's a tradition.
Right? A made-up tradition from our own family.
So in the end, you have a reason why.
It was a statement that we want to be religious. Maybe, I don't know.
No, I don't think it's being. Unless you understand being religious as going through certain actions, doing certain
Only a
actions.
person who was interested in Judaism would take the time and trouble to spend a year to learn a Sedra.
Right, but what does it mean interested? He's interested because he's interested, not because the God commanded.
Yeah, God wasn't really very much involved in it, I don't think.
He's nowhere to be found.
No, because it was never taught to us.
Because it's not an issue. It's not an issue.
It wasn't so that, we had an argument with Hashem and said, you go and stay over there, we'll stay over here.
We did when we were born. And since then, we've only been feeling ourselves. We feel separate. So because of that, we can't...
And I didn't choose to be born in Reading as opposed to being born in Meisharim.
When you look at it as everything...
It wasn't my fault. My mother was in hospital and I had to be there where she was, right?
When you see it as everything is... all actions that are taken are all in the end nullified within godliness, whether I recognize it or not, then the only question is, can I recognize it at some point? Can I recognize that everything that I did, everything that was in my life, was all 100%, all of it, there's no other option, all of it 100% was, or can be, seen as part of godliness.
Not the Averas.
Why not? Of course, also the Averas.
We're learning the almost end of Masechta Shabbos after an immense struggle with Moshe Rabbeinu rebuilding his house and all sorts of obstacles.
Yeah.
Read the end of the penultimate perik of Masechta Shabbos, which describes what happens when a person stops breathing and how all the body just falls to pieces. All the lovely things that happen, and because he was too busy involved in what 99.999% of the population die from. And then you start to think to yourself, that was...
The psukim from Kohelet.
I don't exactly where it all comes from. I don't remember all the quotations, but 999 out of 1,000 people died because they're too busy with Tashmish.
Yeah.
But nobody, even when you were married and with your wife, you didn't think there was something wrong with that. 70 years ago, it's a bit late now, isn't it? 70 years now. It's a wee bit late.
No, it's not late. You can lift it all in one moment.
That's what Hashem said.